Welcome to This Is Not About Your Body, a body neutrality podcast where we talk about all the real shit body image issues are actually about because they're never just about the way you look. I'm your host, Jessie Nealand, and today I have with me Devon Day Moretti, a trauma-informed coach with a focus on helping women change the way they relate to their bodies. She has certifications in personal training, nutrition, breathwork, reiki, and meditation. And Devon brings a very playful, sensual, kinky, and unapologetically erotic energy to her work, sometimes even calling herself a fitness dom, which we're going to get into. I have also known Devon for years, and I am just thrilled to have her on today to talk about all things sexy fitness. So welcome, Devon.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to officially be here because I know that we've been planning it. Jessie's been pinging me for a while. I'm excited to officially make an appearance.
I'm excited to have you here. So I'm going to have you start by just telling everyone a little bit about yourself and the work that you do outside of my bio for you, which I think kind of went all over the map, but so does your work.
Yeah, it does. It does. And you did such a perfect job. I'm like, well, you wrapped it up very well. My work is really centered around helping women reclaim their relationship with their body, with their confidence, with their pleasure, with fitness. And I work with the modalities of personal training, coaching, energy work, breath work, talking a lot about sex, just talking about sex from this very positive place. And then I've been doing this work for about 8 years now, and it's always wild to me as the years go on. I'm like, wow, I love that I've been doing this for so long, and I'm so passionate about it. And my work has definitely taken many directions as you've been on this journey with me. But it always kind of circles back to the heart of my work, which is really just bringing women back to themselves.
I love that. So, yeah, I mean, I have seen your brand evolve quite a bit. And it's funny, actually, because now I'm wondering, did I follow you before you did fitness? I don't know how long you've been in my orbit and I've sort of followed your brand, but you've obviously gone through a lot of different things. And I definitely knew you as more of the like strength and conditioning type fitness, personal training coach type person originally. And I wanted to hear a little bit about that journey for you and your own personal relationship to movement and how that has shifted, because I know that it has. And obviously that has also gone into your brand and your business. So what was your relationship to exercise like before, and what's it like now?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely been a journey. Like in my in my teenage years, obviously for most of us, we go through going through the motions, kind of doing what's expected of you. Mine was obviously always rooted in, I had an eating disorder for a while. I had really bad body dysmorphia. So my movement was always centered around doing cardio and doing what I thought was going to be the best way to change my body. And then I discovered, as I started to recover, my relationship with fitness moved more into strength and powerlifting. And I feel like a lot of people go through this transition where it's like, it's not about being skinny, it's about being strong. And I think that there's healing within that. And I started to focus on what my body could do and eating to fuel my body. I got really heavily involved in strength training and strength coaching and focusing on what your body can do. And I dove into personal training, and I was a personal trainer for a while. Obviously, I still am. And that was my center focus for a while. And as I worked with so many women, you see the disordered patterns that come up, the reasons to why they want to work with a trainer to begin with. And then my work shifted, as well as my relationship to movement, and really just kind of questioning everything. That we kind of had a little conversation about this prior to the podcast, just on our relationship with movement. And I never stopped movement altogether, but I did stop moving in certain ways of like, why am I training like a bodybuilder? Like, why am I going in and doing like upper body, lower body day? And what about all of these other wonderful ways that I can move my body? And I started to explore yoga more. I've been going to dance classes, still do that a lot. So it's been kind of this evolution of originally doing it to change my body, then getting into it from this very empowering place, but then really questioning, okay, but like there's so much to unpack here. And why am I really moving my body to begin with? And now it gets to be this fun, intuitive, playful, sometimes sexual thing.
I love it. So, for anybody listening who doesn't know, I also came from the fitness industry. I know you know this, obviously, but when people ask like how I got into this work, it's like I'm always like, because as a personal trainer, I saw the in and outs of basically people coming to you to solve a problem you can't solve. Like, they wanted to feel better about themselves, like less shame, more freedom, more joy, all of these things. And fitness is great. I mean, I still love like lifting heavy. It still brings me joy when I can do it. But there's just like such a misunderstanding of that being the one tool to like rule all tools, and it's not. It can't give you what people are really looking for. So I think a lot of us left the fitness industry and went, okay, well, what can?
Yeah.
And I love that you're still in the fitness industry in some ways. Like, you're obviously pretty counterculture in a lot of ways. It's a really unique lens you bring to movement and fitness. But sometimes I regret leaving it just because I'm like, man, there's so much that needs to change there.
Yeah.
And we need people kind of questioning these things and staying in the industry. So it makes me happy that you're like swinging back into the fitness space.
Yeah, that's part of why I came back to it, because I do love fitness so much. I always have. And I went really far into the edge of like, let's help women heal their relationship with their body. And I'm like, I really miss this and I want to come back to this. And it kind of feels conflicting because of the work that I'm in. And then I'm like, but that's exactly why I want to go into this space, because I can help people recognize that it's not fitness that's necessarily toxic.
Okay, that is brilliant. I'm going to have you just talk a little bit more about that. So it's not actually fitness that's toxic. So for anybody listening, I feel like, just as context, a lot of people who are going through healing phases, whether that's like disordered eating or eating disorder recovery, or, just body neutrality, body acceptance work, among other things in diet culture, a lot of us leave behind fitness as a concept because of the industry's toxic messages. Like, you have to work out to eat dinner, and the whole point of like being alive is to shrink yourself, etc. So say more about that it's not actually the fitness that's toxic.
Yeah, what I like to I actually had people, I was really hesitant to come forward and bring fitness back, of like, what is the response going to be? I had a few people confront me of like, how are you going to, fitness is like so toxic, blah, 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 blah. So I had mentioned, fitness isn't necessarily toxic, but the industry can be, because of what we're taught about movement. Like you said, it's this form of punishment for our bodies. It's centered around changing how we look. And I really want to come in and completely redefine how we're approaching it, because one, I think so many of us are just kind of tired of fitness being about changing our bodies and looking pretty, and weight loss. It's just really boring. It's not sexy, and it misses the mark, and it just misses so many beautiful things that movement does for us, because it really does have this ability to completely enhance our lives in every single way. And I want to talk about all of the things that movement does to make us feel hot. Like the fact that our mental health improves, or we're starting to get better sleep, so we have more mental clarity. we have more energy. It can serve as an energy pick-me-up or change our whole mood or energetic posture within a matter of minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I walk away feeling happier, more energized, more connected. It improves my sex life, it improves my day-to-day life, it
Yeah.
improves my mood, like all of these things. It completely like sometimes just clears out this stagnant energy that's accumulated
Yeah.
through the day. And these are the things that are so beautiful that we miss out on because we've been conditioned to operate from this place of like, okay, you better be a good girl today and go to the gym
Right.
and do that 30-minute or like 30 minutes on the treadmill and then the 50-minute workout,
Mm-hmm.
lifting weights, and then people get caught up too and doing it quote the right way instead of what actually like intuitively feels good for them that day. Um,
Yeah.
and we see a lot of just like dysregulation in the fitness industry or trying to force ourselves to go into the gym when something I like to talk about is like movement is a form of medicine, but it can only be a form of medicine when we're like tuning into our body and listening to our body and honoring what it needs. And if we're really stressed out, the gym may not be the medicine. If
Right.
our system is shot, we're dysregulated,
Yeah.
really emotional, we're grieving, and we're trying to shame ourselves into going to the gym and lift heavy weights and go balls to the wall, it can be more detrimental to our health and just put more stress on the body.
Yeah.
Um, and so those are the ways in which fitness can be really toxic and also just kind of misses the mark on what it's meant to do to begin with.
Absolutely. I don't think people, well, I don't know. Nobody in my circle in the fitness industry anyway, ever talked about like allostatic load or stress impacting the nervous system, any of these things that once I learned that like you are better off eating a burger and being happy in terms of like health outcomes than feeling shame and eating a salad and feeling deprived. Like, I was like, wait a second. I had learned that everything is sort of like objectively healthy or unhealthy. And it just strips so much about the human body and brain and experience out of it. And yeah, I feel like we're kind of stuck. Like, this is something my clients bring up all the time is rejecting fitness culture as part of diet culture is hard enough. But then trying to come back to a place where you can move your body without falling back into like the moralizing of you're a good or bad person if you worked out or the beauty or body ideals or diet culture bullshit. Like it is so difficult. And there are so few resources out there for people who say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's more nuanced than that. And like, let's talk about what might or might not be healthy and good for you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That is like, I find that a lot of people that do come to work with me have gone through their recovery and they want to
Mm,
get back into movement, but there aren't a lot of resources out there. Or I think that the fitness industry has really kind of taken on
yeah.
the body
Ugh,
positive,
yes, totally.
but inside of the programs or inside of the coaching, it's not really changing, which I don't think is entirely their fault. I don't think it's
Sure.
ill-intended. Um, but yeah, there's not a lot of resources in that space on like how to get back into it. And I think
Yeah.
there's conversations about joyful movement, and I think that's really beautiful and helpful. But yeah.
Yes, but I don't find people, well, for the people that they connect with it, obviously that's great. But that's a little bit like saying, with body positivity, like if you can love your body, that's great. You should definitely do that and don't keep searching for new stuff that might work, right? If joyful movement connects with you, you're good. You're just going to go do that. But I think for a lot of people, that's not enough of a hook. And all of the messages that have been like complex and moralized around movement get in the way of them being able to even really take joy in it. They're like, well, my choices are do nothing and feel guilty or make myself do something I don't particularly like because it's good for me.
Yeah. Or like even in just even coming up against like not all the time is it going to be joyful.
Mm,
it's like, sometimes it's like, I know I really need this. Like I can tell my body
Yeah.
really don't want to do this. And I'm going to show up for myself in this way, even though it's not joyful.
Maybe that's my issue actually with joyful movement messages. I'm realizing right now that it's like it's the discipline component.
Yeah.
That in joyful movement, if you enjoy it all the time, you're good. Carry on by all means. But most of us are not going to feel joy all the time, just like most of us are not going to love our bodies every moment of every day. So it ends up feeling unrealistic. And I know for me, like a pretty major part of my movement practice is grouchy, like very grouchy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
So
I've heard you talk about like grouchy acceptance.
grouchy acceptance, yeah, is a body neutrality term. Yeah. You're
Uh,
like, roll your eyes, move on. It doesn't have the power to like impact your self-worth or anything like that. It's just like you're allowed to throw a little tantrum about it and then move on.
yeah.
And I think that's exactly what I do with a lot of my movement practice. And so it feels really cool to hear someone hold what can be distorted so easily, like discipline, doing things you don't want to do, distorted into like a tool of self-punishment and conforming to all these ideals, and actually be like, maybe it comes from you though. Maybe it's just good for you. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
talk about, okay, I want to hear more about that. Sorry, but I also just want to have you give me like, why bother with fitness? Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, obviously, we know it's good for our physical health, but as you said, that's often more complex than people realize. Um, so we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and then we want to introduce it back in. But like, why bother?
Yeah. I think obviously, yeah, it's great for our physical wellness. It's also really great for our mental and emotional wellness. And as somebody who has a history of struggling intensely with depression, and
Mm.
is incredibly anxious, helpful for me. And it is like
Yeah.
obviously antidepressants and things for anxiety are beneficial and have a time and place. And movement, by all means, is not the cure all.
Right.
And it is something that is part of our medicine practice with our mental health. But even
Yeah.
outside of that, because sometimes it's like, yes, we know that it's great for our health, we know that it's great for our body and the longevity of everything. And sometimes that still doesn't like really move and inspire us, which is why I
Yeah.
bring in this like pleasurable component to it of like, can we make it sexy? Because it is. And sometimes it's just about like kind of um, relating to it differently. So it's like, yeah, I want to just like have my me time. And this is a way for me to
Yeah.
move some energy that's again accumulated over the day. If you identify as an empath, you take on a lot of people's energy. It's a great way to kind of move that energy out of the body. Or it's like, I want to be bendier in the bedroom. I want to be more flexible in the bedroom and be able to do all the positions that I desire. Or it's I want to go on a walk and instead of listening to like a self-help podcast, I'm going to listen to erotica.
Yeah.
Um,
So you're really talking about like finding new whys for
mhm,
moving your body. And I think so if your why is innate to a sport, a hobby, like a movement practice that you just love, again, you might not have to go through this, right? Like if you just love rock climbing, go rock climb. But especially if the sport you loved was working out in the gym, I think a lot of us go through like a real griefy period of like missing the thing and also knowing that maybe we can't go back to it and not having alternatives that are like quite as deeply connected yet. So you're talking about finding whatever the fuck gets a person back in a way that feels meaningful and interesting to them.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
doesn't have to be constant joy. It can be anything that matters to the person. And for you and your brand, like sexy is a reason. And I love that.
sexy and definitely like mental and emotional wellness. Like
Yeah.
that's my biggest why is like I know that I need that and I don't feel
Yeah.
myself or I just know how I feel when I'm not moving my body. And even if that's
Yeah.
just like walking daily, like it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be going to the gym, but doing something for me
Yeah.
physically is really helpful because it does have those effects on my mental health.
Yes. So it recenters you. I mean, and so much of your work is about restoring agency and restoring autonomy and restoring that like internal drive as opposed to external factors like society says you would look better. Um, it's even just restoring like you to your values. What do you value?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Also, my older brother's a personal trainer and he trains me twice a week, has been doing this for years. And I show up every time pretty much grouchy and like resistant. And I'm like, let's do some stupid mobility stuff and like balance on a balancy thing because it's good for me. Um, but he asked me recently, like, what I might want to train for, like what would really feel important for me to like train for. And I was like, well, I'm thinking about writing a second book. And he was like, okay, yeah. So, okay, that is an interesting thing to train for, like sitting at your desk for 12 hours a day for a year. We can work with that. But ultimately, like, it is what matters to me. It is the thing that makes me keep going. Is it doesn't really matter what it is. It's just, it doesn't matter to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I totally connect to sometimes just being grouchy because, when it comes to motivation, it's like, I don't really have that. I'm
Ooh, say more.
I'm like motivated once or twice a month where it's like, I can't wait to work out because I've got this new sexy outfit.
Right.
Other than that, like I'm not always like motivated. I do it because I know like I love how I feel during and after. Um and like again, like the values and the things that I care about are what keep me going.
Yeah.
I'm very rarely motivated to do things that are good for me.
Devon, that is very real. That is so real. Okay, so let's just assume that there are listeners right now going, I'm sorry, what are you talking about? Like the whole, you have to get motivated to exercise. How would you explain it? Like, what is it, if not motivation, that is keeping you in motion then?
Um, I I really like feeling good. And I know the things that are going to allow me to feel good. And I know how I want to feel mentally, emotionally, physically in my body and the things that support that.
Yeah.
And um that and I like to be the woman that takes excellent care of herself. Like that's another thing. It's like
So
I
it's an
want
identity thing too.
a little
I
bit
love
like
that.
this that I am that woman that kind of takes care of herself. And
Yeah.
like that obviously like being a business owner and an entrepreneur, people who hold a person that holds space for a lot of other people, I need to ensure that I am centered and grounded or else my work is going to fall through the
Oh
cracks.
yeah. Okay, so let's go back to this discipline thing because I think very similar to the idea of motivation, we have been sold a package of untruths that we inherently should or do hate to move our bodies.
Mhm.
Like that's our natural state, is like to not want to move our bodies. And we have to override that using whatever we can to like stay motivated, or we have to call upon discipline and willpower. What I hear in the nuance of what you're saying is like not the throw it all away. Those things have no place here, but they can't be the driving force. So tell me about your relationship to discipline specifically around this. Like what what does that look like post bodybuilder discipline programming, following everything to a T?
Yeah. I think a lot of things that are good for us have been corrupted by fitness industry, diet culture, just societal programming in general. And I have been on a journey of really, what are the things that I just push away because of the fitness industry? And can I maybe like redefine them for myself or for
Yeah.
come back to it? And discipline was one of those things because I'm just like, fuck discipline.
Right. I feel like that's maybe a little bit still where I am. I don't know that I've
Yeah.
actually
And I
circled back to heal it.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, but why? And I think it's because it's like we're told discipline is about having more willpower and more self-control and being perfect with our habits and our diet and our fitness routine.
Yeah.
And it's got this very like harsh, shameful presence to it. And, you know, people go through these periods of like inspired bursts of discipline, or, you know, a burst of discipline inspired by self-hate. Um,
Right.
and discipline, and this is where like the fitness industry kind of um, ruins this for us, because discipline can be a really beautiful thing when it's intended to nurture and affirm and empower. And
Mm,
the way that I connect to discipline now is kind of what I shared of like, it's about showing up for yourself. It's about being
yeah.
the person that follows through on what they're going to commit to. Um,
Right.
and really having the attitude of, I deserve the best for myself and I'm going to consistently show up for myself. And it's this beautiful way we can foster self-trust. And um, I I think it's also really important to make sure we're doing it from a loving, aligned place, because
Right.
oftentimes it's not. For example, if you're a mother with one or two kids and you're a single mother and you're working a full-time job, go and you're trying to be disciplined about going to the gym 5 to 6
Hmm.
times, it's like, I don't think that's a discipline problem.
Right. It's an
Um,
alignment
yeah,
issue. Yeah.
yeah, and forcing ourselves to be disciplined about things that actually don't make sense for us. So I really like to kind of explore, like, discipline can be a beautiful thing that allows us to cultivate more self-trust. And we also have to be considerate about what we're trying to be disciplined about, because I think that's often what's shaking our relationship to it.
Oh, yes. Do you know, just right now, I realized that some of my aversion to both the word and the concept of discipline, I mean, a lot of it comes from like toxic messages of basically it's supposed to be self abandonment or self oppression, right? Like pick an external goal that society says you have to do and you use discipline to get there. But it's also a word that means like punishment, like you punish a child, you're disciplining a child. So I think in my head, it is punishing
Mhm.
kind of no matter what. But I totally see your point that when you've chosen something that feels aligned and really autonomous to apply discipline to, you're not like wrapping your own wrists with a ruler, you're just like going there and doing the thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's fascinating. How do you get to a place? How do you get to be here, Devon? How do people do what you're doing?
Um, can we reorganize the question?
Yes, we can. It was a trash question. It's not written on my list. I just feel like I'm so aware when I do these podcasts of, as things are said or brought up, like, ooh, I bet listeners would be really interested in that. Or I bet, I can kind of hear like a question coming up. I feel like everyone listening is going to be like, that's very nice for you. How do I do it?
Yeah,
I want to ask the question, but I'm not even quite sure what I'm asking. Just like, what advice would you give to a listener who's like, that sounds really nice, but I have no idea how to get there?
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's obviously very dependent on each individual, because I do think a huge part of coming into this space is doing a lot of body image healing,
Hmm.
recovering from diet culture and being incredibly informed on the ways that it shows up, and like relearning and re-educating
Yeah.
ourselves on what it means to be in a healthy body, what it means to be in a small body or a
Hmm.
large body, and that those things are not tied to our health. And I think that's a really important piece, because we're then able to kind of discern how we're starting to go about things, or
Yeah.
when things are starting to become a little bit disordered. And that's why it's also helpful to kind of have somebody that can spot those things for you, because sometimes we don't notice.
Right.
And it's so invasive that it shows up in such small ways. Even like with some of my clients that are very aware, or who are newly like recovered, it still shows up in small ways, or in ways that they're like, oh my God, I didn't even know that.
Okay, so I think that's maybe what I wanted to clarify is this is not step one of anything. This is
Yeah.
like step 94, and you really can't skip the steps in between. So if anybody is listening and is like, oh, I'd like to shift from my disordered relationship to exercise and body stuff to what Devon does, please know that for most people, there is a long journey. For both of us, there has been a long journey of unlearning, challenging, redefining, like healing, all of the things. And that really what we're talking about here is coming back on the tail end and returning to movement in a way that feels aligned, accessible, autonomous. Because I feel like, yeah, there's so many people out there who are still holding over themselves. Like you can't be lazy. Lazy means bad. Like discipline is the only way to be good. And you really don't get to skip all of that unpacking work, like you said, to get to where you're at now.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's really essential part.
So a huge part of your work, you use the word reclaiming, which I love, is helping women specifically reclaim these things for themselves. It sounds like you encourage people to redefine
Mhm.
certain things, in this space. Could you talk about the benefits of that or why that's so important?
Yeah, well, I think part of the reclamation is for where do I want to start with movement, for example, of like kind of what we've gotten into. It is something that can enhance the quality of our life in so many ways, and it's kind of been stolen and taken from us, and now when we go into it, it's all about changing our body and feeling shameful. So it's like, can we reclaim this, because this is something that can really bring so much goodness into your life, and I want that for you. um,
Yeah.
and then with our body or with our pleasure, it's like we've as women, we've been kind of programmed and conditioned into like, our pleasure is not for us, our body is not for us. You know, our we have to work really hard to look a certain way in order to cater to the male gaze, or we go into these sexual experiences and we're not actually having a pleasurable good time, because it's all
Yeah.
about pleasing. If we're having sex,
Yeah.
speaking normatively, if we're having sex with a man, that's what that's about, his pleasure. And so I really want women to come back into centering themselves in their own experiences, and having all these beautiful things like pleasure, like their body, like movement, um, become something that they just can't wait to saunter into, and that they
Mm.
love. It feels like theirs,
Yeah.
and isn't diluted with all of this conditioning.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Sometimes I think it's harder to interview guests who I like really align with than it is to sort of interview across different like lines and perspectives, because I just want to be like, uh-huh, me too. I feel that way too. So like in my practice, restoring basically a sense of worthiness that is not based on what you give someone else is like pretty life altering for a lot of women. And you are inviting it emotionally, physically, sexually, like you're bringing it back in and saying, we're not going to be doing any of that shit for other people, but that doesn't mean we have to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So if anybody goes to Devon's Instagram, you will find basically a whole bunch of kinky thirst traps. So now let's talk about that. Could you, well, actually, I'm just gonna have you start by giving a little bit of a definition of kink and BDSM, um, and why you're playing in that space in terms of like, I know you've already talked a little bit about your own relationship to movement, but why you encourage other people to maybe think about it that way.
So as we talked about in the beginning, my work has taken many directions, and it went into fitness, it's gone into body image, it's gone into sex. And this year, my business just feels so much like me.
Yeah.
It's bringing everything into one, and that feels really good. And part of coming back to fitness was like, I don't want to share like workouts. Like that's what everybody's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very rebellious. I'm very like, I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. How do I make this different? How do I make this debit?
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what like I brought to it of like, well, fitness, let's make it sexy. Let's make it fun.
Yeah.
And let me integrate all of these things that I love and that I value and offer so much healing into this space. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how it got brought in. And then I added in the kinky element because yes, partly personality and something that I've explored in my past that has offered a lot of healing. And I know that the kink space gets there's a lot of conversations on how that can be such a healing experience for people. And since I'm coming back into fitness of let's make this healing and let's reclaim this, let's also add in this kind of piece to it.
Yeah.
That's kind of how the fitness dom came to be in all of this.
Okay. So what does that mean to be a fitness dom? And for people who aren't deep into the kink or BDSM community, like even just dom, you can give us a little insight there. Because I do feel like that it makes so much sense that they would be a natural fit, given everything you're saying about the reclamation. But a lot of people haven't been introduced to the kink space. So,
Mhm.
what is a fitness dom and what does it mean?
Yeah. So I started by saying like I want everyone to be a little fitness slut.
I've seen you say that, yeah.
And that's really just being somebody that is like so into taking care of themselves. Like that was
Mm.
the energy behind it. Like I'm a slut for just being well taken care of. And with the fitness dom, I we I feel like dom is often seen as the person that's in charge, the person that is controlling everything, but I don't connect to the dom that way. I connect to the dom. I I would say that the sub is usually the one calling the shots because if
So,
we
just to interrupt real quick, this is in reference to the dominant and the submissive role in a BDSM dynamic using power exchange. In the kink world, this is people who play in this space in literally any number of ways. But sub and dom are titles for certain people to step into and out of when they're doing consensual power play. So carry on. But if someone didn't know that, I feel like that background matters. So, okay. It
yeah.
is definitely a perception that the dom, the dominant person, would be the one in control,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, the dom has all the power, but really the submissive has all the power because there's safe words, right? Of like
Mhm.
when we've reached a boundary, when we're close to touching that boundary of when things are, we're gonna put things on hold, or stop here and just play here.
Yeah.
And that is something that usually the submissive is the one to communicate. And the dom is, yes, facilitating and orchestrating and guiding this whole experience. And it's also really centered around pleasing the submissive and having this beautiful pleasurable experience for the
Yeah.
submissive and reading body language of the submissive and seeing
Yeah.
what the submissive is really enjoying and liking and being turned on by. And so adding in the fitness dom was more so like I am here to like lead and guide, and I'm ensuring that this is a trusted container, that it is pleasurable and fun and good for you, and we're
Yeah.
here to like honor your body. um And so, and the submissive is still in power in that way.
Yes. So I think another major misconception around BDSM is that it's all like, dark dungeons and, like ball gags and whips and pain. But really, I mean, I have only like started to dip a toe into this world, but it can be that if you're into that, obviously. But like for most people, it's certainly not that. It's actually a lot more of just like an exaggerated experience of what we enjoy in like a regular ass human life. But I feel like what you're saying here is that as a Dom, you can be loving, caring, nurturing, generous. Like it's not this selfish, I do what I want and I take what I want. That's exploitative. And that's what like capitalism and the fitness industry and so many other things give us. You were talking about consent. Like you are inviting a consent-based concept of kink and BDSM into a place where literally the internet is rife with people exploiting others and being like, do what I say because I'm a drill sergeant and you're bad if you don't. And you're like, well, like, what would be fun for you? I wonder. Like, that's literally so brilliant and brings that agency in immediately, that respect in immediately, the safety. Like, and it's not patronizing. I feel like there's so much of the exploitative thing that is patronizing. Like you're an idiot. And if you listen to yourself, you're going to fuck it up. And you're
Yeah.
like, how about I give you instructions because you want me to? Like,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. And then like that's a whole other part of it of like we can be so overwhelmed with choices and options. And like there are even periods where I'm like, maybe I just like want to have a trainer because I don't
Yeah.
want to do my own workouts and
Oh
I
my God,
like
it's the best.
programming.
Yeah.
Um, so it's nice to have direction. It's nice to just have somebody tell us what to do at times. And that doesn't mean like it's because they're above me and they know my body better than I know my body.
Right.
And that's something I lead with a lot of, you know your body best. Here are some options
Yeah.
for this. Um, I was gonna say something. Oh, and with the Dom too, like I've immersed myself in that world. And I've also listened to a lot of like workshops with DOMs and dominatrixes, and I have never really connected to the Dom that degrades people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really connect to being a Dom that is very sensual and
Yeah.
generous and kind and warm and loving, and also can bring that energy of like, I want you to be a good girl for me.
Yes. Yes. And only with people who get some kind of pleasure and joy out of being told they're a good girl.
Exactly.
Like, what a joy to bring that dynamic into a place that is so disempowering and fraught.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Um,
fun too. And I have some clients that are like, yeah, I'm here for like reclaiming fitness. And I have
yeah.
other like dom me.
I was literally wondering like what your clientele demographic is. Is it mostly people who are like drawn to the kink specific dynamic? Is it mostly people who like are submissive or are dominant and drawn and want to learn from you? Like where is your population of people?
Um, a, a mix. So I
Okay.
have a lot of women that have recovered from diet culture, body stuff, and are wanting to come back to fitness. And they know that like that's my offering, and they have a hard time finding people that talk about mixing those two.
Yeah.
I have other people that are like, I really want to embody more of my sexuality, and I really like this kink element
Mm-hmm.
into it. So yeah, I do have a lot of people that don't really touch the sexy stuff, but then some people that primarily come.
Yeah. I think it makes so much sense. And anyone who's like not into kink or BDSM who goes over to your page, I think is literally just going to see you
Yeah.
because and having followed you for so long and also I often will mute like old friends from the fitness industry because I'm like I just don't want fitness content.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know if you were ever muted or not, but I definitely wasn't paying as close attention. And once this whole fitness dom thing started, I was like interacting. I was like, let me make this show up. This is great. This feels so like I said, unique and I think really necessary, like the actual content, but also the most authentic. Like it's a really fun, very you way of getting into something that people take so seriously too, like fitness.
I know. I know. Like, can it just be fun and chill?
Okay, so something that you say sometimes that I love is it's hot to be well taken care of. And I would love to have you talk about what you mean by that. Like you've already gone into it a little bit maybe, but yeah, what does that mean to you? It's hot to be well taken care of.
I really like to connect to our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with our body as a relationship that we would have with any other individual. And I think in repairing our connection to both ourselves and our bodies is really considering how is it that I want to be taken care of? You know, what is it that I like desire in my partnerships or in my friendships? And how might I, you know, how could I give that back to myself or reflect
Mm,
that back to myself? And sometimes that means being well taken care of is I'm not shaming myself for not going to the gym
right.
because I wouldn't want my partner to come into the room and be like, why the fuck aren't you at the gym?
Right. Right. That's a great point. Yeah.
And other times it's like I um I'm trying to think of another of like, hey, like I know that you're like really feeling like a lot in your body and there's a lot of stagnation that's accumulated. And
Yeah.
I think it would be really, and you've been like laying in bed all day. And I think it would be really helpful to get some sunshine, go out for a walk.
Yeah.
So I
So it comes
think,
from this really nurturing place that if a partner did it, you would feel like so seen and
yeah,
cared for. Yeah.
yeah. And I think, we talk a lot about that and just building a relationship with ourselves. And I really like to look at our relationship with our body as the same thing of our body is always speaking to us and communicating to us. And can we start to build this loving partnership where we're attuning to its needs and its
Yeah.
desires and start to have that dialogue?
Oh yeah.
And re part of I believe that part of having a working through some of the body stuff that comes up is starting to listen to our body and connect with our body, and that is part
Right.
of like what is your body needing.
Yeah. So it's the nurturing of a relationship that matters to you, much like any other. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, the thing that I was drawn to when I first started hearing you say it is like it's such an obvious redirection or redefinition of hotness from
Yes.
something that you can see that has to do with conventional beauty and body ideals to something that you feel.
Mhm.
Like it is an internal experience and that feels hugely important.
Yeah.
And there's something kind of sexy and playful around the idea of like being taken care of is a little bit of an innuendo. And I think we're used to casting someone else in that role.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
cool to be like, you can be in that role.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, just redefining what it means for things to feel hot or be hot. And it's just like somebody that's emotionally available is so attractive, so attractive. Can I be that
Yes.
for myself? That's attractive.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So what does hot mean to you? What is the feeling like internally? How do you know you're feeling sexy, feeling hot? Like what are you picking up on or looking for in those moments?
Safety is a big one.
Oh,
Yeah, safety. Feeling like connected. Um, feeling very like seen and heard. I think obviously all of that kind of filters into safety a bit.
yeah.
Um, and like being very loving with yourself. And I'm very mindful of saying loving because I do
Mhm.
think that it's very distorted of like, it means to love how you feel. You
Yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah,
know how
totally.
you feel, but love how you look, and you don't always love
Yeah.
how you look. But we can, it's having this loving voice of like, I, hey, I see that you're having a bad body day, and that's totally okay. Like, that's the loving voice that
Yeah.
I do. So those are the
Totally.
things that are to me.
I just want to say that it's rather startling to hear how all of those things are obviously a part of being able to be like aroused with a partner,
Mhm.
and yet so often missed when we think about what it would mean just to feel like sexual and alive and, kind of juicy in and of yourself. Like if your partner makes you feel unsafe physically, emotionally, or makes you feel unseen or misattuned or any of these things, like you're not going to have a super sexy time. And this is something you're offering yourself in the world. And it sounds like in so many ways, but movement obviously being one of them, like committing to the care you need to thrive being sort of the central focus here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know the very first self-helpy nonfiction book I ever read? Like I have an addiction now. I read so much. But the very first one was The Four Agreements.
Yeah,
And
same.
really? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's so weird. So it blew my mind. I mean, as a lot of these books do, when you've never been introduced to anything in a certain realm, it's like every one of those first 30 books I read like changed my goddamn life.
Same.
And now I can just like read stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, that was interesting. That kind of like, fills out a
Sometimes I
concept.
miss that.
Me
Sometimes
too.
I feel like I don't have like, you every once in a while I would come by a groundbreaking book,
Hmm.
but I'm like, wow, a lot of this is the same. I wish I could go back to when I
I
was
feel that too. Or sometimes I wonder, like, what if I'd been introduced to this first and it would like, anyway.
like
But the
that
whole
too.
thing in that book, I don't even remember them all, but I know one of them is to be good to your word, to be good on your word, whatever be true to your word. So to me, what I'm hearing in all of this is like an invitation to redefine fitness, movement, exercise, whatever it is, as like an act of rebellion, saying, you don't get to define what this is for me. You don't get to strip it of joy, and you don't get to make me throw it out with the bathwater because I had to heal.
Mhm.
This is mine now. I'm going to connect it to my values, my priorities, to an inner sense of knowing like what care looks and feels like, and to a commitment to the fact that I'm worthy of feeling good,
Mhm.
period. And whether or not, you find sort of an eroticism in fitness, like everyone can benefit from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Last question would be, what advice would you give to a listener who wants to cultivate those things and is, on step 1 through 5?
Cultivate the relationship back to movement.
Yeah. Actually, no. Let's say that someone's gone through the healing process in terms of like overcoming dysmorphia, diet culture, disordered eating, whatever it might be, but they're still stuck and wondering like, how do I get back into this in a place that feels aligned and reclaimed? Where do you recommend they start?
I really, I think a good place to start is making things ritualistic.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is like, and adding like a pleasure component to it. So for example, something that a lot of my clients love that I've recommended that are getting back into movement, or just getting back into being in their body, or adding in a little bit of like a regulation practice and letting it be something that feels like this is grounding for me, this is me time,
yeah.
is in the evening, let's turn off all the lights, let's light all the candles or put on some fun neon lights, let's put on a really delicious playlist that's
Mm,
something that's intentional, not just, remixing it. And let's do a little bit of breath work, and let's stretch, and let's just
mm,
stretching or foam rolling or feel really good in your body in that way. Or
yeah.
I want you to go into the gym and I want you to put on your best sex playlist, And I want you to like embody the music
Mhm.
that you're listening to and put on something sexy. And that could be a fucking t-shirt. Like
Right.
you need to define what that is for you.
Yeah.
Maybe spritz your favorite perfume and listen to that sexy playlist and see how differently you interact with the gym,
Yeah.
embodying that, listening to that, and going in with that attitude. And also just pick an upper body, a lower body, and a core exercise, ones that you like, and do that 3 rounds. Do 3 rounds.
Mhm.
Or like, let's go on a slutty girl stroll and go outside on a walk and listen to some erotica. I know I'm inviting in all the pleasure, sexy components
I
too.
know.
I think it's like fun to just make it something that's ritualistic and
Yeah.
inviting in, like, what do I want to embody in this? And like, how can I make this for me? Or how can I make
Yeah.
this just something that's also like chill or fun or inviting me to step into something?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Okay. It was an absolute joy to have you on here. Can you please tell everybody where to find you on the internet, how to work with you, etc.?
Yeah. Everything is Devon Day Moretti. So TikTok, Instagram, my website, devondaymoretti.com. A lot of my work will be found on Instagram. That is where I'm most present. And you can go to my website, devondaymoretti.com, to check out my offerings.
Thank you for being here.
Having
I want to send everybody over to you, but I'm also aware, like, because of the authenticity and the like brandedness of some of what we've been talking about, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. But I
no
do also feel like we
president.
have really nailed in on the fact that the underlying message applies to everyone. And whether or not someone's like into, the way that you're showing up in this space, like, I hope that this episode has been really illuminating, because I think there is no one on the planet who can't benefit from the idea of redefining, reclaiming, bringing joy and pleasure and that internal like connection to movement, to fitness, to health, to all of it.
Yes.
Thank you
Beautiful.
so much for being here. And thank you to everyone for listening. And I'll catch you next week. Hi everyone, I'm Jessie Nealand. I just want to take a moment to thank you for watching this video. I put out new episodes of my podcast every Tuesday, so be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss those, and feel free to leave me a comment. If you are looking for more information about body neutrality or you want to work with me, you can always find me at my website, jessienealand.com, or you can purchase my book, Body Neutral, a revolutionary guide to overcoming body image issues, wherever you buy books, ebooks, or audiobooks. We can also connect on Instagram or TikTok. My handle is Jessie Nealand. And I make this podcast for free and without any sponsors or ads. So if you want to support my show, you can use the Patreon link in the show notes, and know that your support is always very much appreciated. Lastly, thank you to my brother, Jason Nealand, for creating the music that plays at the beginning of the show. And thank you for listening, learning, and moving toward personal and collective body liberation.